right, we're good. Here are the decks. We are unmuted. I have the invite, and we have like 3 minutes to talk about the decks, basically.
All right. Well, Blaze of Glory, pretty much exactly the same as we've seen with Ice. Very strong card with Ice. Squirtle, not going to be utilizing the Squirtle trap variant. It's going to be just the movement package once again. We saw this very similarly happen last time with movement. Now we're going to see it again. I believe Squirtle was banned, so don't have to worry too much about Dead Eye Ambush in this version. However, we will get to see some line pockets. Yes, we do get to see some Syndicate action finally. I mean, I must say, I'm so excited to see Syndicate actually back in the competitive scene because, you know, Syndicate for the longest time now has kind of taken a backseat to competitive Gwent, not really seeing much play on Predator and in tournaments. And now Syndicate is back stronger than ever, and it's going to be some very, very interesting gameplay to see that in action.
Yeah. But with that said, we're getting very quickly into our gameplay action as we see Fate on blue coin going against Pargali on red, Skellige iced versus Carapaccio.
Yeah, I mean, Carapace is a deck that's just very annoying to deal with sometimes. I mean, sometimes you can, if you have the answers, it can be a pretty easy deck to beat, but if you don't have the answers, then it can be quite a nuisance. And we'll have to see which bracket that falls under in this time around, as we're gonna see Skellige versus Carapace. Now, Skellige in the past used to be pretty bad in this matchup, but now maybe with this lead ability and Iced, maybe things can change because Skellige has a huge finish and a lot of removal reach with that Iced and leader ability value.
You have the removal reach. You have the removal reach, but you need the setup for it. You do need to have the damage units. You need to have the right targets for your damage and that sort of thing. So that can be, you know, a little bit tricky. And with the defender, I don't believe there's any Gremist this time around, so you can't purify it. You have to get through it other ways. With that said, Fate opening up with a very big, thick longship, and Pargali replying with Siri Dash. Leader charge but no veil.
Yeah, leader charge with no veil, which means that Pargali has to be very careful about getting any units at Bloodthirst, because if Bloodthirst gets achieved for Fateee, he could potentially lock that Siri Dash. So that is something to be very mindful of. One thing you mentioned earlier about the ice is, it's a very good valid point, is sometimes getting Bloodthirst 2 against an uninteractive deck like this to enable that ice could be very difficult. So that is potentially something Pargali could utilize to try and deny that ice, just be uninteractive and make that ice unable to come down for its deploy value. Whereas now Pargali has to be mindful of the Siri Dash, does not want to allow this Jenga to lock it.
Yeah, and just deciding how it is he wants to, you know, deal with this. I think, you know, you saw him hovering the ice there, maybe thinking, you know what, why don't I just come up with a way of dealing it? But you don't have the Bloodthirst, so what would you do? Float the ice, at which point, you know, your opponent can remove him, and then you don't see the big value from it. Natural selection being utilized to kill the raider, and again, keeping this very uninteractive board state, where there's not an easy way for Fate to damage Siri. There's not an easy way for him to set up the lock for Jenga. You know, he just needs one Bloodthirst, but to get that, you need to deal, what, like 4 damage or 3 damage to Siri? No, 2 damage to Siri, but still.
Yeah, it's not very easy to do. Now, we do see does come down that Marauder getting a Bloodthirst, so Pargali gonna use that Adrenaline Rush, boosting up that Siri, making sure there's no more Bloodthirst on the board, does not want to allow that Jenga. Now, Siri will probably go off as Fate will have to commit leader ability right now if he wants to deal with that Siri, which is not something you really want to do in round 1, I think. So looks like card advantage might be getting threatened soon, and that's one thing that's so scary about Carapace is card advantage. They can get it so easily with that Siri if Siri is allowed to stick.
Yeah, and there wasn't really anything Fate could do here without expending one of his major tools, right? Unless he expended the leader ability there. There wasn't really much he could do. So you have to decide, is them having one more card worse than me not having that massive power swing? And I think that's an obvious answer. No, right?
And now we see the Bloodthirst finally coming on the board, but it doesn't matter now, as the Siri has done its job. Jenga not really going to do much here any longer, as we see a second on-crate longship coming on the board as well. But Pargali could utilize some special cards potentially and mitigate some of that value, as we see now with the pack going to keep playing uninteractively and making these boats not really that scary for the time being.
You do have to be a little bit careful with your special cards with this list, that you have some left over in the bank for Keltulis, such that you can manipulate the board state with the number of units. With that said, Fate has 2 longships on the board, so you can't really play into this. You know, playing into this is just giving them so much value that it doesn't really work. Like, I feel like Fate is likely to win this round, but win this round at a severe card difference.
Yeah, the card advantage is going to be pretty scary, because if Pargali gets to go into long round 3, especially double final say, I don't even know if Ice is going to be able to do that much, especially when you consider the fact that Defender is going to be able to protect units from Bloodthirst and make that Ice so awkward. And there are some cards that, the Beast coming down here, actually, there's no Blood. Again, there's 2 leader charges being used from Pargali in round 1. That's a little bit expensive, but wants to deny the removal value onto that Beast, and also makes there's no Bloodthirst, no Jenga Jenga can't get any value anyway because of the Veil. So, yeah, I mean,
but it's a bully, right? Because now if you pass, the Beast triggers goes. Oh well, I guess you play 1 more card, so you lose on even, right?
Yeah, I mean, Fate had like a spot. So if Fate kept playing here, he could end up being in a position where he loses round 1 a card down. That is absolutely irrecoverable. Not something you want. Not something you want to happen here. That being said, though, does he have to use another leader charge? He's taking 2 damage. He's getting 2 points on the Beast. He's going to have to use a 3rd leader charge. That's quite big. Entire leader had to get used in round 1, which means that if Fate can get through the Defender and get a Bloodthirst, he could potentially use the Jenga to lock that Keltulis, which could actually change things entirely.
Yeah, that is actually a massive cost for that round. All 3 leader charges. If you can keep 1 and put the Veil on Keltulis, it denies the lock, right? That's what you're kind of wanting to do. But then maybe you believe that your opponent can just, you know, using Ice get through your Defender. That's what it kind of comes down to, I think, is whether Fate can set up the Bloodthirst. Because if Pargali can deny the Bloodthirst, then Iced is quite sad, you know, and that there's removal options that you can stop the second discard. We'll have to see.
It's going to be a little bit of a tug of war between these two, trying to get that Bloodthirst and trying to get that Ice value. But again, Pargali has given himself a little bit of vulnerability with the fact he has no leader ability. He's going to push here with the Defender, it seems, and this gives Fate a fairly decent turvy, as you can't really purify the Defender, because if you do, you lose your Defender status, so you don't really want to purify it. So we might just see Turvy come down here onto that Cave Troll and try chip away at it a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't quite kill it though, because you're dealing the 7 damage and 4 of that's hitting armor. You're not getting straight through the Turvy, and with the Neuromancy, straight through the Defender. And with the Neuromancy, you do have access to at least 1 special card to protect him. With that said, Pargali doesn't have a whole lot of boosts in his hand. You know, we saw a lot of special cards being spent in round 1, and then this is a situation where then you maybe run out of heals.
Yeah, that's definitely true, as we now see Ice coming down with leader ability instead, and that will kill the Cave Troll. I guess maybe Fate's deciding he's going to keep the Turvy to try to deal with the Keltulis, but that being said though, I mean, at that point Pargali could just purify the Rupture of the Keltulis, and now we see Yegan coming down here with 5 armor, as that Ice won't be able to use its final proc. I mean, there's no way to discard cards anymore, so unfortunately that Ice won't be able to get its final light. However, there's one thing that's interesting. When you have Devotion, Ice says when a card is moved to the graveyard, if something is killed on the board, does that count as moving to the graveyard? If Pargali kills something, does Ice still...
Does it come back? No, I can't imagine it does. I think when it says move to the graveyard, it means like with Blaze of Glory, because Blaze of Glory doesn't discard a card, it moves a unit to your graveyard, right? So that's because CDPR don't want Blaze of Glory to trigger discards. So then I think the wording with Ice is to allow him to work with Blaze of Glory, is the logic there. I think Fate is just respecting the fact that if he doesn't deal with his Defender, he could potentially get 2-0'd.
Yeah, that could be it. Also, I guess he wants to maybe try to recover his card here. And now we're going to see Blood Eagle coming out. That's Yegan on the brink of dying. Only needs to do 3 more damage, and that Yegan is gone. As we now see a Neuromancer can be grabbing that Keltulis, which will be able to kill either the Ice or the Hunter.
How lucky are you feeling? Not very lucky.
I mean, Fate could maybe go for a self-gutting slash and try and make things very awkward, and doesn't rather takes the lock instead of make that. I guess that's just easy way to do it. And
that's where Pargali was unlucky there, because if the Keltulas had hit the Hunter, the 50-50, then you don't get the lock there.
Yep, it would have taken one more turn for Fate to set that up, and unfortunately for Pargali, that's the thing about using your entire leader blitz in round 1, is no more Veil to help the Keltulas out. It means the Keltulas not really doing that much in this game, as that Yigo now dying to this Bear Witch, and suddenly things aren't looking too bad for Fate. He might be able to go into round 3, still keeping a decent portion of his cards with that Harold the Cripple and the Turkey still, as we now see Fate just able to kill this Netball pretty easy with the Gunning Slash as well.
So at this point, they're just kind of trading cards, and Pargali deciding, you know, what cards do I actually want for the final round. And I think trading Steve the Aperian Phantom for a Turkey or a Harold is not a bad trade.
Yeah, for sure. Now we see down comes Turkey onto that Kelly, and there's no Purifier for Pargali, so that will go through. Ozril, I don't think it's worth. I don't even think he can play the Ozril, to be honest. I think Ozril will not be able to do enough. So I think Pargali has no choice but to pass. Looks like we will go. I guess he could have actually played the Ozril, actually. If you want to try trade for that Harold the Cripple. But looks like we're going to go into round 3 on equal cards now. Both players expending their leader abilities, so no leader abilities for either player. We have Ozril versus Harold right now. Let's see what the final mulligans are going to show for both of these players.
Yeah, and both of them drawing into their Echo cards, the Blood Eagle and the Aneromancy, so they do have access to, you know, specific tools should they need them. But there are, in Carapace, a lot of these low provision, low value cards, things like Dimmeritium Bomb, things like Natural Selection, which you're not necessarily wanting to see, you know, 4-point cards, that kind of thing. With that said, you do have the option to be uninteractive, because Skellige, they like to touch your stuff, they like to deal damage, and if Pargali can play uninteractively by utilizing some of these cards, it puts Fate in a bit of an awkward position where he loses out on value.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a bit awkward for things like Skjordal. However, Fate does have 2 very nice proactive plays with the Totem and the Harold the Cripple, so he can potentially dodge a little bit of that uninteractivity. Blood Eagle might be a bit awkward. Skjordal might be a little bit awkward, of course, but I think that Fate has a fair amount of proactivity to deal with this, and probably going to just seem lead off with the Totem here, and that's exactly it. And I would imagine Pargali is going to use that D-bomb or natural selection here to kill off one of those fanatics for the time being. Be a little bit uninteractive, try brick some of Fate's card. I think at this point Pargali is just really hoping that Fate will not be able to get that Blood Eagle into Harold the Cripple. Unfortunately though, for Pargali there, Fate does have Harold the Cripple in hand, does not need the Bloodthirst or the Death Blow to set up that Harold the Cripple. Will be able to get it out quite easily.
Yeah, then a Neuromancy coming out, I'd imagine, into a Parasite. Continue to be the uninteractive friend that you wish, and hope that Ozril is enough points. I mean, you're denying value here, right? So Skjordal is just a 5. Blood Eagle doesn't have a target. So Blood Eagle is dead. And you have a 14-point Ozril.
Actually, the uninteractivity will actually... He forces the Blood Eagle to be discarded, and Ozril finisher will be enough, it seems. The value of uninteractivity will prevail. It seems like Skellige did not actually have enough proactivity to deal with this.
Yeah.
And
I mean, talked about
weakness of Skellige.
Yeah, I talked about, you know, bad bronze cards and holding on to these 4-5-point cards, but the fact that they didn't put points onto the board meant that Skellige lost out on a huge number of points there. And Pargali managing to make it through to the end with just Ozril versus what looked like a super stacked Skellige hand.
You know, honestly, I thought that Fate had that one, but it looks like the uninteractive value was enough for him to pull out on top there, as he just was a little bit shy on the points to beat out that Ozril and all that uninteractive cards. I mean, you look at the hand quality, one was full of golds, one was full of bronzes, but the bronzes actually coming out on top due to the fact that, you know, have that uninteractive value, and Skellige just losing so much value on their damage cards like Skjordal and Blood Eagle if there's nothing to actually interact with.
Yeah, that was quite eloquent. Like, this is the kind of competitive Gwent that I love, is these situations where, you know, by the way that cards are played, by the sequencing, that can dictate the order, because you sequence that completely different and Skellige completely stomps on you. You know, and it worked out for Pargali because they had last say, and because of them bleeding that far, although they lost the card advantage that they'd gained, they managed to put Skellige in a position where they had to play first, and then there was never a target for them. So, you know, what are you going to do in that situation?
Yeah, it looks like, I mean, this matchup is one that used to be quite favored for Kaltulis, but that was really close. That was very, very close. As we're going to go into game number 2 now. Pargali with the early win. If he gets to win this next one, he will win the game. We get some line pockets, Jaggerous. We're finally going to get to see it. Some Syndicate in competitive Gwent for once. Very excited to see how this ends up playing out.
Syndicate, and we're on the Novigrad board just to, you know, make it extra juicy, extra exciting. So Pargali now on blue coin, trying their hand at Skellige versus Fateee. I don't know if we pronounce the extra E's or not, but versus Fate.
I'm just going to say Fate.
On Syndicate. Do you feel like Fate with 2 E's was also taken?
I mean, Fate's a very common name.
Yeah, like Fate's taken, then Fate with 2 E's was taken, so you just keep adding E's until
or maybe we should just go on the Gravesh route and just become Fate.
That's probably also taken. Realistically. I think someone already took Gravesh. Like, Gravesh changed his name to Butthead or Headbutt or whatever. And someone instantly was like, right, I'm gonna be Gravesh now, so, you know, that's gone.
And Pargali gonna start things off with just a Grimace. I guess in this matchup, Grimace not really doing a whole lot, so Pargali just deciding to throw out the Grimace for now and kind of get a feel for what Fate's going to do here. Fate's opening hand, he does have the Novigrad Injustice, but the problem for that is there's no Craftsbuilders on the board now. Novigrad Injustice did get a recent change where you have to have a Dwarf or a Craftsbuilder on the board, otherwise you will not be able to get a Cleaver's Muscle to spawn. Unfortunately, without any Craftsbuilders really in hand, that Justice is kind of a brick card for now, so won't be able to play it in this round 1 unless he wants to commit something like a Cleaver's Muscle, or maybe even a Neuromancy onto a Crown Splitter. That could be an option for him too.
Yeah, I think with the Grimace, Pargali's hand is also a hand that is very, very reactive. We talked about Skellige reactivity previously. You don't want to play Herald round 1. You don't really want to play Kadok. Then you've got damage. You've got a card that deals damage. You've got drawing a raid card that probably deals damage. You've got the raiding fleet that deals damage. See, this is what I meant. You get to the point where you run out of targets. And Fate is like, well, you played uninteractively in the last game. Hold my beer. I'll show you how it's done. You know, doing the same thing to Pargali that Pargali just did to him.
Yeah, I mean, again, Skellige, just one of those, you know, these control-heavy decks do struggle with proactivity. Unfortunately for Pargali here, his hand is a little bit too reactive. I mean, there's not really much he can play now. You don't really want to be giving up round control, I think, against this deck. So Pargali, I mean, I guess if he does pass here, it's a bit difficult for Fate to do the points. Although Fate has 8 coins in the bank, he can. I think he can make a way to do it. So, this is what's so good about Syndicate sometimes is you can kind of react with your opponent's side of the board, be uninteractive while also developing coins and keep them in like an uninteractive state. Now, if Pargali were to pass, Fate can spend all those coins. So he basically has points, just not on the board right now.
And the thing is, Fate is going to give Pargali a target here in the Redanian, but you know, that's not a target you really want to be, that's not really someone you want to be touching, right? Because as soon as you kill it, it just comes straight back.
Yeah.
So it's not even a good target for any of this stuff. I mean, I guess you can use it for Blood Eagle to try and pull a card out of your list. That is probably the next option. Because you don't want to put Bleeding on it, it's just going to come back. And if you get a boat, yeah, Pargali just get to the point where there's not enough things to touch. So you're just piecing it around.
Yeah, very, very annoying for him. And I mean, Fate can pretty easily do this with a number of ways. If you could play an Urchin here, although that overprofits a little bit. But other than that, you could play Neuromancer for a spender. Very easy for Fate to do these points here. And I expect to see this Syndicate deck probably going to push round 2 quite heavily, as Skellige can sometimes be a little bit awkward to defend some bleeds. What to see what ends up happening here, as Fate just deciding what he wants. Does he want to commit the Urchin and spend more coins? Does he want to play the Neuromancy and maybe get a better spender out?
I mean, you play the Urchin, you're over-profiting, right? So you are losing out on points a little bit in that regard. The Neuromancy, what do you pick to make up? Because you need, what? You need 7 points here. And 7 points can be a little bit awkward without spending, but to spend, you need a spender, right? So I think losing the profit on the Urchin, or going down to 2 cards, I guess.
No, he can. Well, I mean, if he, yeah, okay, he's spending his coins.
Yeah.
He's gonna spend the coins here, and
But he's going down 2 cards, right?
is he playing another? That's weird. Okay, so he's actually gonna just take a long round 3. Then I mean, that's a little bit scary because then you get to play into, you know, you give them the long round 4 that for that ice. Then again, though, Syndicate also, make no mistake, Syndicate has a good long round as well. It's not like Syndicate has a bad long round by any means. They have some really scary cards. You know, you have that Skewer Tooth, which you can use Tribute to get that immune engine on the board, which means your opponent can't interact with it. And we all know how much Skellige hates not being able to interact with things. And then you also have just so much value in your other engines. It can be quite scary. So let's see what happens here as we're going to probably go into a long round 3, it seems.
Now that was a rope. I don't think that Pargali. I don't think that Pargali Fate. I don't think that Fate necessarily intended to go down to play 2 cards there. I think they were doing the maths, they were looking at their options with the Neuromancy, and they got to the point where they didn't have enough time to click, because you needed to click the Urchin there like 7 times or something. So I'm not convinced that that was necessarily the line of play, the line of credit that really Fate wanted to take.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And there's the Skewer-Tooth. And Skewer-Tooth is such a good engine against Skellige, as I mentioned. Just that immune value. Skellige just hates uninteractive gameplay. And, you know, that's what Syndicate can do sometimes, is be uninteractive. I mean, a lot of decks can abuse that against Skellige. So let's see what happens here. I'm assuming that Fate is going to be dry passing 2 cards down. Not really a situation where you want to be bleeding in that situation. I guess he might just play for some carryover. Maybe we'll see him play that... He's not going to take care of it. Just going to take the pass here, and we're going to go into a 10-card long round 3. Will Skellige be able to stay on top of things, or will Pargali be able to make use, or should Pargali Fate make use of that uninteractive value?
Both players, if you can see, really valuing the cards in their hand, opting to carry the cards forward rather than playing cards. You know, sometimes in round 2, if there's cards you don't want to play in round 3, you'll just play them in round 2 and go down to 7. But we saw 9 cards there for Pargali and 8 cards for Fate, suggesting that both players feeling pretty confident with the hand state that they have. With that said, Fate not really playing into that round also meant that the graveyard is not particularly established for Pargali, right? Yeah,
the graveyard for Pargali, it's not sure what's left. Okay, looks like, I mean, he's got the Raider, he has got a Helmatar with the Bear Witcher, and he's got a 4 provision card for War of Clans. I'm not even
and I guess with Blaze of Glory, you can also... Well, actually, no, it comes back, doesn't it? Ice brings everything back.
Yeah, it comes back immediately. So one card that is in deck for Pargali is that Ice. Now, Bloodthirst 2 is going to be something that Pargali is going to need to achieve to get that Ice value as. But in the 10-card long round 3, you would imagine it should be possible to get that Bloodthirst 3. Now we see the tribute coming out from the Skewer Tooth, as once again, Skellige hates this. Immune cards, uninteractive board states, not what Skellige likes, and we see it continuing again here in round number 3, it seems.
Yeah, but in this situation, Pargali does have some proactive plays with the Herald. He doesn't have to play the Raider damage yet, so he can kind of float the damage. And floating damage is a bit scary because it does mean that should Pargali need the reach to kill something, it's available for now.
Yeah. I mean, there isn't that much proactivity. There's like 1 or 2 more cards that Pargali could play proactively. But other than that, it becomes very awkward. Now, let's see what Fate decides to do. Does he want to be uninteractive, or does he want to get that Cleaver down early as possible and get that Intimidate value going? Looks like he's going to play the Bloody Good Fun and maybe kill the Herald the Cripple, it seems, for now. As Herald the Cripple is a card that kind of cheats the uninteractive board, so he can kind of bypass that immunity and still ping it. So looks like Fate wants to just get rid of that Herald the Cripple as soon as he can.
Herald the Cripple also in a long round is crippling, you know, the amount of damage that he can put out. So it's a good removal target, for 1. And for 2, once again, you are playing uninteractive, and Pargali just played a dry Turgvi. Nothing has been ruptured, except potentially Pargali's game plan.
Or Turgvi's ego. That is definitely going to be a very sad Turgvi indeed. Nothing really to interact with, and Fate now. Will he try? You can clearly see now. This gives Fate a lot of information. Fate now can look at this board set and say, "You don't have proactivity, do you? Well, I'm going to carry on being uninteractive then." And he does just that with that assault. And this is the thing. We saw it last game. We saw it this game again. That's one of Skellige's big weaknesses. Is their reliance on high removal gameplay does make them vulnerable to these annoying strategies where your opponent just doesn't really want to put many units on the board for you to deal with.
Yeah, and Fate does have options. You know, the Neuromancy in hand does mean you can go fishing for interactivity should you need it, and you do have, you know, Payday, for example. With that said, you are going to reach the point where the flying Redanian comes out. But again, that's not really somewhere that Pargali wants to be putting damage.
Yeah, it's going to be a very awkward for him. I mean, he wants to play his Radiant Fleet, get this boat down, but he can't even do that because, you know, there's nothing to interact with again. So Pargali now going to have to figure out what to do for proactive plays because he really doesn't have anything left. Now we see Justice finally coming down as Fate saying, okay, fine, have it your way, you can finally start interacting with my board enough. And now Pargali can actually start getting some value going. However, that being said, because of the fact that he played this Justice very late, the safe crack is going to be much worse. And also, the Cleaver isn't going to be as threatening anymore because there isn't that many crime cards left either. So there has been a little bit of a downside for Fate sequencing the way he has. He's also lost some value of his own whilst he's tried to deny Pargali some value from uninteractivity.
That is true, and it's gotten to the point here where it's going to be very hard for you to play around the Bloodthirst at this stage. You also need to protect that tunnel drill, or at least try to, or spend.
Here it comes. And look at this drill here, just absolutely decimating the board and using all leader charges with it. Drill, just such a nice way to convert points into, or coins rather, into damage, and then Skjortl gonna put an end to that now. Enough drilling has happened, and that drill will be put off commission now, and into the graveyard it goes.
It's out of commission. It turns out that there was a big health and safety hazard involved by taking a giant drill into tunnels under Skellige. There was some fears for earthquakes. The Board of Health and Safety said no. Skellige came down, and Skjortl was like, sorry, but this is now decommissioned. But, you know, the damage has been done. Because Pargali had to float the raiders, he couldn't utilize the damage from that because of the board state. So not utilizing that damage means that now, because of the drill, you've denied that damage. And the drill's kind of done its job in that situation. You know, if it had survived, it's nice because you can continue to profit. But you've got other spenders, and you've managed to manipulate the board state in such a way that you're probably pretty happy with the outcome.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about drills. When you can combine it with your leader ability, you can get so much value from it on the board. It doesn't even have to survive. It can be good enough as it is. As now we see Cleaver coming down. Interesting, not putting it between the cross splitters. That is mostly
Monka rope. That's gonna be a rope. It's gotta be. You heard the countdown. We saw what happens.
He did boost at the right target with the shakedown, so unless that was random, he did have time to click on the right target unless it was just randomized, but that lost him potentially 2 points. I'm not sure if that was a rope or not because he did look like he clicked on the gear, but that is...
I don't know. I think Fate's been roping quite a lot this round. We saw it also with the pass. It felt like it was a bit of a rope there as well. I don't know.
Yeah,
I like how you give them the benefit of the doubt, but I'm like, nah, he's roping.
I mean, he did lose out on 2 points from this. Obviously, with Cleaver being between crown splitters, he gets additional intimidate value. So that Cleaver could have come down at 7 points instead. Now it's only coming down at 5 points. So a little bit worse there, and now also maybe a bit easier for Hjalmar to kill as well.
He can develop another crown splitter on this side of the the Cleaver though, right? So he can create the pocket. I think he has a safe cracker.
He does, but I don't think you want to play a safe cracker. I mean, Furko has got melee row, so you can't even take Furko, so it's pretty not great for Fate. However, it looks like this will survive, and we're going to see that fee being used on that Cleaver. That's the nice thing about Cleaver. It's a great spender too. You can convert 5 or 4 coins to 5 points, and not sure why Pargali hasn't dealt with it yet. I mean, he needs the death blow for... Ooh, he's going for the Blood Eagle now. Oh no, he's going to Hjalmar now, never mind. How is he going to get this Bloodthirst 2 and this Death Blow?
He's got Bloodthirst 2, but he's about to lose it, right? From the Safecracker.
And if he took the Blood Eagle there, he would have lost his...
He's got Hunter though. Right, so he can use the Roko Hunter to set up the Bloodthirst onto Siggy. Siggy Ruben. There you and he's got the long ship, so the Blood Eagle, the Bloodthirst isn't too bad. Then the Blood Eagle target you can set up here on the Redanian. It's gonna come back, but at least you're getting the death blow.
Yeah, looks like we're gonna see down comes that big that big Caduce value with this Ice. Is Ice gonna be alone to carry this game? I mean,
yes.
Fate has a point gap. He's got 9 coins in the bank. He still has Philippa, or 5 coins rather, and he still has Jacques. So Fate has a lot of points. Is Ice going to be enough? It has to be a
There's not a good target either for the Blaze of Glory. So the Ice isn't going to be as big as it potentially could be, especially with the Philippa here instead of something like the soul. You know, you're not going toll. The toll unit you have is immune, so you can't target it. I guess like that's you've kind of gone a little bit toll with the kidnap, but we'll see.
I mean, this is a big ice. I just don't know if it's going to be quite. I mean, it's going to be close. I mean, I'm hesitant to say it because he finds the gutting slash with the ice. That's terrible because that means he can't get the resurrection value. That is not what you want to see.
And look at all the other units in the list. There were so many other units in Pargali's list.
Oh no, and it's actually really close. Oh, that's so unfortunate for him. I think if you got a better ice, maybe you could have won. I mean, that is definitely. I mean, the ice still played for 15 points. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but I mean, if you got a 5-point or higher unit, this could have been a different outcome here. So it looks like it's all tied up now. I believe Fate taking the win. 1-1.
Using the official Jaggerous metric of whether the game was close, we can see that a 5-point gap does in fact mean that the game was close, ladies and gentlemen.
Got it right. Very happy.
So a close game there. But you're right. Like if there was a different discard, you needed what 6 points. So it could have gone. It could have gone the other way.
And that's what's always very awkward about playing ice as your last card. If you play ice your very last card, you know, sometimes you're at the mercy of RNG. If it draws you a special card like that, it's pretty terrible. And yeah, I mean, I say this, I still play for 15 points. Don't get me wrong. This was still good ice value. It just wasn't quite insane. And I think Fate, or I think Pargali, they needed insane ice value. Good was not good enough. You needed insane.
Well, you know that kind of came down to how Fate played as well, because didn't Pargali play the Greatsword? I think it's called the Greatsword. Didn't he play the Greatsword from hand? When his discard target he had to play.
Yeah, I think you want to play the ice last because he had to play Kadoosh first to get the heal value, and it was awkward, so he played the ice last. But if you do that, you know, you run the risk of drawing into a special card like that sometimes, or just a not very valuable card, and that can sometimes happen, unfortunately. And that looks like it's going to tie the series all up now.
So do we have a Skellige mirror? Yeah, we do.
I think we do.
Skellige versus Skellige. I think Skellige is going to win. I would put money on it.
I would. You're probably right, Jack. Skellige should, unless we do a tie. I don't know what.
Yeah, but which leader is more value?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to come out to Final Say. Final Say is huge in this matchup because if you get Final Say, you can kind of play that ice to deal with your opponent's ice and get more like toll punish value from your leader ability. So I think this round 1 is going to be very key here for these players.
Yeah, we might see some iced on iced action. You usually have to pay extra for that. So we see players mulliganing, setting up their hands for the round. Getting rid of things like War of Clans and those sort of cards that, Herald as well, that you don't typically want to play in round 1. Just mulliganing them to the Shadow Realm, as typically you can find them again with Blood Eagle. So it's accessible.
Yeah, I mean, Skellige does have the benefit of being able to mulligan away some of it. Unfortunately, Skildle there, one of those cards you also kind of want to mulligan early on. But looks like we are going to see a fairly awkward hand for Fate here. Not that many cards he really can play. You don't really want to play Totem run 1. You don't want to play Ice run 1. You don't want to play Skildle run 1. So could be a bit awkward. That being said, Pargali could also have some awkwardnesses, as he does have Hjalmar. Can't really play around. He does play Grimace, and I believe that Fate does play Turgid, if I'm not mistaken, which means that Grimace will find some good value, I believe, to purify that Turgid value. So that could be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, so Grimace in Pargali's list, an unusual inclusion in Warriors. We don't always see people go for Grimace when... Grimace is one of those cards. He either is really, really useful or completely useless. There's never an in-between. He's never like, Grimace was okay. It's either Grimace saved the day or Grimace was garbage and deserves to be mulliganed. I
mean, sometimes he purifies like some bleed and he can play for like 9-ish points. Sometimes not. There is some middle ground that can happen, but I also tend to agree. Grimace can be a bit of a hit or miss card, as we now see that and Hunter coming down on the board with that Crystal Skull, giving it Veil. So let's see what happens now, as there's no more Gutting Slash for Pargali to utilize right now onto that Hunter. And Totem now, big commitment coming from Fate early on, and that just shows you how much players are valuing having that final say. Totem being a pretty big card to commit on blue coin, it seems.
I think this is the thing with Skellige mirrors also, is the blue player tends to have a bit of an advantage, if only because you're the one setting up your damage first. So Fate is in a position now where he can kind of react to the Hunter and still keep his engine on the board, like so. So now, Fate's managed to maintain his Hunter while getting rid of Pargali's. So he's in a position where Pargali is always kind of trying to set things up, whereas Fate has already established his setup to an extent.
Yeah, I think Pargali is probably just going to have to set up his graveyard and accept losing round 1 and say that maybe with a better hand quality. And we see Raiding Fleet also coming up for Fate. That's another big commitment. I think at this point, Pargali is going to say, okay, I don't know final say, but you have a bit of a worse hand than me going to round 3. Maybe that's enough for me to win round 3, even being without final say. We'll have to see what happens. And now we see down comes that Fabian onto a Blood Eagle. It's going to be a bit of an uphill struggle for Pargali to come back from all these engines being developed on the board.
I think, though, that Fate needs to reach the point where he stops committing into this round. Like, he has, you know, he played the Raiding Fleet, which does thin your deck, admittedly, but you've committed an engine, you've committed your totem, you've committed your Rockfall Hunter, so another engine. So you're kind of getting to the point now where you need to calm down. You know, you need to slow down a little bit and think about, what do I want to keep, you know?
Yeah, you definitely need to try and preserve something. You can't just go completely ham, as we now see Blood Eagle coming out onto...
Raider. It's got to be a Raider.
Yeah, I guess you want to get that in the grave for Health of Cripple later, so it might in fact be a Raider for sure. But final say is big, but you know, at the same time, big commitments coming out from Fate in this round 1. We'll have to see if that is enough to swing the balance potentially.
25 points to 3. This is a bit of a one-sided round 1 so far. And
yeah, I mean, Fate is saying that final say is so valuable in this match, he doesn't mind committing a little bit, but at the same time, I think he does mind a little bit, but we'll see what happens in round 3 as Fate has now secured himself final say. Now, something interesting can happen in round 3. Something very interesting with this matchup. If you don't have final say, you could go for a very risky line where you play your Ice as your very last card to put your opponent in an awkward spot, because you want to play Ice your second last card so you have that guaranteed card to discard. But maybe if you don't have final say, you can risk it. Play your Ice your very last card, put your opponent in an awkward situation where they have to play their Ice the last card to punish your Ice, and then you can kind of you can reduce the game to a bit of RNG. You know, if your opponent's Ice becomes bad, you know, they draw a special card, then you can win. So it could be quite interesting to see if that ends up that interaction ends up unfolding.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that in that situation, Pargali is going to be going first in round 3. Assuming we get to round 3. And when you're going first, again, you're in the position of setting up the engine, setting up the cards, setting up the removal, and your opponent is playing into that. And that can also have an impact. If Pargali can manage to kind of control Fate a little bit, then maybe losing last say won't matter. We'll see.
Yeah, could be interesting for sure. That being said, though, Pargali, does he not play Totem? Let me just take a look real quick. It looks like he doesn't play Totem. Okay, so he does not play Totem. Playing a little bit more mid-tier cards with the likes of Grimmist. And he also plays Hjalmar and Toby, interestingly enough. So let's see what ends up happening here, as Pargali going to lead things off with a Bear Witcher. Not really what you want to be doing, as that's not the most appealing practice play to make.
Yeah, but it is round 2, you know, so...
Alright, it's not 2, of course, then might have
no, it's round 2, so it's okay. You can
yeah.
play that and just have your opponent pass, keep all your good cards.
I guess that sets up the graveyard for Hjalmar as well, and I can do 8 damage with Hjalmar, so not too bad. As we're going to go into a long round 3 here, so here comes the final Mulligans, and let's see what these players
equal. There's a lot of bronze being drawn there by Fate, whereas Pargali, he got the Raiding Fleet, he got Jenga.
To be fair, Pargali has spent a bit more gold in round 1, so there's less
Harold,
gold to draw into. Ooh,
Harold in hand. That's an entirely golden hand.
Yep, that
what even are bronze cards? They're literally all.
This is quite interesting because although, and this is what we spoke about earlier, is one player would have a better hand quality, one player would have final say. Obviously, Fate end up spending a bit more to win that round 1, so he has himself a bit of a worse hand quality in this round 3. But he has final say, and will final say be able to make up this deficit? It will be quite a big deficit to make up, but maybe it will be enough, because I mean that's a lot of points he gets for having that final say potentially.
But the thing is, Fate's also then the one who has to react. Like, you have to react to this Herald. So what do? You play your Skyrdle, you kill the Herald, but then the Raider damage is still floating, and then Pargali develops a second engine. You know, he plays maybe the Raiding Fleet, gets an uncrate ship on the board, and then everything that you play is getting damaged by 1. They've also got 2 damage in pocket, and your hand is very, very bronze.
Yeah, that is also very true. However, now we see the value of uninteractivity once again showing its head as we now see um, the Kadoosh coming down onto potentially a quartermaster, perhaps because, or maybe even an adept.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately for Pargali here, uninteractivity, a little bit annoying for him. And we're gonna see down comes what exactly. It is gonna be a quartermaster, and there isn't really much uninteractivity that Fate's gonna have to stop putting units on the board at this point.
Yeah, getting to the point where you can't really keep playing uninteractive. You know, you've played your gutting slash, and now we get on to playing actual cards. With that said, Harold is in a pocket. You know, he can be healed by a couple points, so you kind of need to deal that little bit of damage to Harold, but you don't really have a good way of doing it. I guess Blood Eagle.
Yeah, I mean, War
But then you
Clans
don't
can
want a
also-
Blood Eagle, right? Because you want to use it for ice.
Could kill
Oh, no,
War
Ice
Clans.
Command.
War Clans can also just kill out Cripple quite easily. But yeah, it's gonna be a bit awkward with so many threats developed on Pargali's side of the board, whereas Fate hasn't got anything set up yet. Gonna take the Skjorl now. Every time that Fate plays a warrior here without Harold the Cripple being on the board yet, he will lose out on potential value as Raiding Fleet coming down on the board, developing yet another threat, and Pargali just trying to keep the pressure going, engine after engine after engine, and Fate just not being able to develop anything of his own right now. And now with Harold Cripple, we'll get boost from the Kadoosh to try to keep it out of removal range a little bit. And
yeah, and it means that those 2 extra points of healing does mean that now you can't remove it. You know, we talked about removing it with Blood Eagle, removing it with War of Clans, but actually now you can't do that, so you'd have to find the damage elsewhere. You could
you can still go War of Clans
Yeah.
into a Hunter and potentially just use that ping to kill the Harold the Cripple. Looks like that's what he's going to go for now, and finally finish with the Harold the Cripple. But I mean, Fate is it's awkward for him. He doesn't have really much developed on his side of the board, whereas Pargali is now going to be able to play Blood Eagle and potentially kill off that Hunter and keep on top of things.
Yeah, that's the thing, because Pargali is going first. We talked about this. You know, he's in a position where he can kind of control Fate to an extent, and Fate allowed Harold the Cripple to exist for a few turns, which maybe was a mistake.
Yeah, we'll have to see how this ends up playing out. I mean, final say, Fate is gonna have a massive play here, but at the same time, Pargali is gonna be able to have the first say, which is actually also proving to be kind of valuable as well in its own respect. Now, Harold the Cripple coming down finally for Fate, and that Raider might be able to do something unless it gets answered by Skjorl. Skjorl going to be able to answer this Harold the Cripple, and it seems like Pargali just always one step ahead of Fate at this point, as he just looks like the first say to stay on top of things.
Yeah, just slowly whittling down the cards on the board, removing Harold the Cripple, keeping your Hunter on the board. You've got your Longship as well, so you've got little amounts of ping. And bear in mind, Pargali runs Gremist, so Fate's Turgvi, if that's what he opts for with the Blood Eagle, really not potentially going to be that impactful depending on the sequencing. And this is where the last say sequencing gets kind of interesting, because Pargali wants to hold the Gremist for Turgvi, but Fate wants to play Turgvi in such a way that he avoids the Gremist. But they also want to play Ice at certain moments in the game, so the sequencing towards the end will become very interesting.
Yeah, that is exactly it. It can be quite awkward for both these players here. I mean, it's a bit more awkward for the player that has to go first, the one that doesn't have final say. But it's got some nuance to how their players are going to sequence things here. As we're going to see Kadoosh coming out onto just a 6-point mentor, and again, this is, I think, owing to the somewhat uninteractive state, which, or not uninteractive, but awkwardness of the Adrenalins and the Bloodthirsts and whatnot. As we now see Grimace coming down, not Grimace rather, but Jagger coming down to lock down that Raider. And now at least Fate has got Adrenaline 4 kicking in, so he can play these Bear Witches whenever he wants. And let's see what ends up happening here. The boat's still being stuck on the board. Going to use it to answer the Hunter.
Yeah.
This boat, though, really, really annoying for Fate. Not being able to answer it is quite a pain in the ass, I would say.
Yeah, this is the little boat that could, and it has, I would agree, been quite annoying. You know, if those boats can stick from the very get-go, you're going to have a bad time. And now we see that some of those more mid-range cards start to come into play, things like the Hjalmar, as opposed to the Totem, utilizing the Banish and being able to remove various targets on the board.
Yeah, that is going to be a nice just value Hjalmar. I mean, it's not anything crazy, but it just stalls a little bit for the time being. Now, Fate
Where is Fate's Bloodthirst?
That is an excellent question. I was just about to get to that. He doesn't have any. I mean, he can use the a Bear Witcher to try get some Bloodthirst, but he needs a Death Blow and he needs Bloodthirst, and I don't know how he's going to do that, to be honest.
What are you gonna do?
Here comes the Bear Witcher. I guess he could use the Blood Eagle to get Bloodthirst, but then he can't get Turvy. I mean, at this point, Turvy isn't even that good anymore. So
I mean,
just...
I guess he could Blood Eagle the Skjordal and then hope that the Marauder sets up the Bloodthirst.
They could do that. I mean, or you could just take the Blood Eagle onto the 6 and get guaranteed Bloodthirst like that way. So it looks like there comes the Turvy. Turvy from Pargali, much more threatening than Fate's Turvy, because Fate, unfortunately, Turvy doesn't do anything with a Grimace in hand.
Yeah, that is true.
Here's where things get very, very interesting. Players going to decide how they want to sequence things. If Fate were to play a Greatsword now from hand, it would force Pargali to play Grimace, in which case Fate could then play Blood Eagle, take out the Turvy, put the Turvy on the Grimace, and then you could play his Ice last if he wants to try and do some shenanigans. It's a little bit convoluted, but it could be an interesting line he could take. It looks like he's instead just going to go for the Blood Eagle.
Yeah, this is what I talked about a little bit earlier with the state of the board. You know, you're in a situation where you've got to kind of sequence in a certain way, but now we do know that Turvy not coming out to play. With that said, Pargali doesn't know that, so still holding the Grimace. Ice coming down, drawing into a Raider, which I guess you discard because you're not going to trigger it as your last play. Back on the board with the damage, plus the leader, onto, I'd imagine, a 10. Into more damage, killing that Raider.
Look at the point gap. I mean, Ice is just such a crazy card. Here comes Fate Ice. He finds a Turvy with the Ice. That's not too bad, except for the fact that actually it is pretty
well, that is because Grimace does health, see?
Yeah, and then here comes the ability onto the Yuta. That's going to be a massive point swing. I don't think it's going to be enough, though. That's a huge swing. It's going to be, I think, 2-point game. I think it's going to just be a 2-point game in the end. Grimace versus Turvy. I think I think that Pargali wins by 2 points, I believe. And that is going to be it. Looks like Pargali will take the series, and that means Pargali, I believe, is 6-0 so far in this tournament. Great record.
Can we talk about the fact that, you know, last say, we were like, oh, last say, that's really important, you can play your Ice last, you have a better board state to play that into. But when you look at the hands, we had the entire golden hand for Pargali. And that just kind of, it came down to that. And when you're in that situation where you're going first and you're able to control your opponent and you can deny them a couple points, you know, we saw a couple points being lost on things like Harold because of the sequencing. And that game, when you come down to the wire, that was a close game. I mean, it's a mirror match, so it has to be close. But by the Jaggerous scale of close games.
I mean, that was close on your scale. Even on your scale, that's close.
Yeah, exactly. even on my scale.
Considering the fact that Pargali plays a Grimace to counter Turvy, considering the fact that Pargali had a full gold hand, it was still a 2-point game. And that just goes to show, I think, that final say does matter quite a bit. It might not just auto win you the game, but it definitely has a big impact in the outcome.